Okay, welcome back. This is our last lecture, and we're going to do something a little different. I figured we would deviate from the textbook, and I would tell you about my art practice. I did my undergrad in photography at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in Minneapolis, and I did my graduate master's degree also in photography at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Now, my undergrad was purely focused in photography. My graduate work was focused in photography and performance and installation. And so I'm hoping that I can sort of show you my journey from photography to my very interdisciplinary practice that I have now. So you can kind of see the evolution of what an artistic practice can take. So we're going to start with this slideshow I did because a lot of my photographic work is not on my website, and then I'm going to switch over to my website to show you my other more recent works. And I actually need to pull that up so that I can share it with you when the time comes. So here we go. Let's start with some of my photographic work. So this series, I was working with large format 4x5 film cameras, and I was trying to see how many exposures I could get on one negative. So I'm using a human body here, and I have calculated the exposure time for a certain amount of exposures on each negative, and each one that you're going to see here has a different amount of exposures. Now, it's been so long I couldn't tell you how many, but I can give you ballpark. The one on the left, I believe, is about 40 exposures, and the one on the right here, I think, is 80 exposures, something like that. So I would have the body move each time I was taking a different exposure, and it would build these sort of cloud elements, which is kind of great because it ties back into what we were talking about with Felix Gonzalez Torres cloud work, and back further to Stieglitz's equivalence pieces. And so you kind of see where I was taking this sort of inspiration from history, but I'm not actually using clouds. I'm turning the human body into these cloud-like forms. And then here are some other ones that have less exposures. I think the one on the left is, oh gosh, maybe 8, and the one on the right is 12 or 16 or something. But you can kind of see the abstraction that comes into play here. And again, these are all done on film. So they were then printed on very large 16 by 20 sheets of photographic paper, so they're silver gelatin prints. From there, I moved into kind of dissecting the body in a different way. I would use glue and paint it onto parts of the body, and in layers, and I would let it dry and then peel it off, and it would make these sort of casts from the body. And so you can see on the left, I believe that's like knees to ankles, and on the right is thighs, and it becomes this sort of specimen of the body, like really kind of studying it. And the thing about the glue is that it would pick up every single mark on the body, and I know it's probably difficult to see on a small screen here, which is why this is so much more so much better to show on a very large screen in a classroom. But if you get really close into these images, you can see little lines from the skin, and you can see like parts where little bumps were and things like that. So this was a smaller series of about 5 of these studies. But again, these are essentially cameraless photographs. So I would take those casts into the darkroom and lay them on top of the photographic paper, expose it to light, and run it through the chemistry to process the prints. So even today, and I'm not the only one, a lot of photographers still do the photograms in that way that we sort of looked at, you know, Talbot doing and Man Ray and all of those folks. In a similar vein, there's this version, vestigial membrane. It's very similar to the residual index in that I'm using casts again, but these casts are more abstract. You can't really tell which part of the body they're coming from. And what I had done with these was I first had exposed them on top of the paper in the darkroom, like the two you see here. But then instead of leaving them so that the casts were white and the background was black, I took those prints and I flipped them over on top of another sheet of paper, flattened it with glass, and inverted it so that the background then becomes white and the subject becomes this sort of darker negative. And so this was another scientific, like, specimen study of these casts from the body. And these glue casts are kind of conflated with all of the emulsion that goes on when you're working with film photography, right? So you have the actual film that you're putting in your camera, and that has an emulsive surface that, you know, it's the light. You have the emulsion and the coating on your photographic papers that you're using. You have all of these mediations between the lens and the subject, and then the mirror and the film. And then further on in the darkroom, you have, you know, the mediation of the light and the lens and the paper, etc. And this sort of aligns back with, you know, mediations that we experience with our own bodies. Our skin is this sort of barrier that you can align with the skin of the emulsive surfaces of the photographic materials. Then we have these latent epidermal scapes, where again I'm using casts from the body, and these are relatively they're more clear, I think, than some of the ones that come before. You can really see the lines from the skin and little pock marks and wrinkles and things like that. And so these were casts that were made to cover the entire piece of paper. Some of them were enlarged, others were left oh, I'm sorry. I totally said that wrong. These were not casts that were made to cover the entire size of the paper. These casts were put actually in the enlarger, and the casts were used as the negative, which is why you can get them, you get this more close-up look. So all of these, and these are, everything I just showed you are larger series of works, but I just pulled a few, you know, 2 images of each so that you could get a little vibe for what each version of this project was. So again, they're all very sort of specimen-like and scientific in their approach, but then you can kind of dive into the more conceptual content when you think about, you know, the skin of our bodies versus the skin of photographic emulsive surfaces and layers of mediation, both photographically and in relation to our bodies. This piece here, the 5 mediations, this one is more of an installation piece using some of the photographs, but we're also using light to illuminate these pieces. So what you see hanging here are large sheets of plexiglass that have these sort of, how would you say, Xerox transfers on them. So if you've ever done any photographic transfers, you'll know that if you print an image off on a laser printer and then you coat it with layers and layers and layers of this acrylic medium. You can then flip the photograph over onto a plexiglass surface and use water to rub the paper off of the back, and what you're left with is this all of the ink from the print sticks onto the surface, and all the paper from the back is removed. Well, most of it. These were very large scale. So this is the front, and you can kind of see the images that are being lit from behind. And then if you look at the back side, you can see how some but not all of the paper residue was able to be removed, but you can still see in something like this, on the left is the front and the right is the back, it still illuminates it in this really wonderful way. And the way that the paper kind of crumples up when you're trying to remove that residue is really lovely. So it's a whole other commentary on the body and photography, just on a larger, more experiential scale, in that you are allowed to walk through, around, and among these hanging works here. From there, I have this installation that took all of these things to another level. So first I made what you see on the pedestals there. They're Xerox transfers where all the paper has been removed from the back, and they become these skins. So what you're seeing is the photograph embedded in the acrylic medium, and they're sitting on these 3 pedestals here. So I made 3 of those, and actually let me show you a close-up of one here, so you can see all of the line work from the print that was enlarged to make these skins. From there, I guess I should go back to that first installation there. From there, you see there's these shadow boxes hanging on the wall, and there's 3 of them, but you can only see 2 here. And in those shadow boxes, you can see are the prints that came from those skins. So I had taken the skins into the darkroom, laid them on top of the photographic paper, and these are the prints from those skins. So I'm using the skins as graphic negatives. And then if we look further, there's one other element to this piece. There were 3 photographs of casts, and the casts were what was used to make the images that you see embedded on these skins here. So all 3 very different elements, right? There's, the first angle of the installation here. Here's another one, so you can kind of see. And then on the wall, from the perspective that we're looking at, this is the 3 photographs that were used to make those skins on the pedestals. So this is something where you're using the body to make these casts, and then these casts are used as negatives to create the images that are then embedded into these skins, these Xerox transfer skins. And then those skins are used to make the photographs that you see in the shadow boxes. So everything is kind of tied together, both photographically and in its exploration and extension of bodily mediation. From there, I did this other project that has 2 parts. Catching Breath Prelude is a performance where I hung a sheet of glass and I stood behind it for 3 hours and breathed onto it. And what happens when you do that is you get this residue that is embedded on the surface of that piece of glass. And so from there, after the 3 hours were up, I would take that sheet of glass into the darkroom and use it as a negative. So the Catching Breath piece is sort of this endurance performance for 3 hours. It's difficult to do anything repetitive for 3 hours, but it was open to the public. Folks could come and watch, come and go as they please. And the result of that becomes a series of photographs that were part of this separate installation called After Image. So here's one of them that came from Breathing on the Glass. And then here is the other part of that installation. So there were 3 photographs that came from the sheets of glass that I breathed on that looked all different versions of this. And then in this installation here, you'll see one of the photographs on the wall, and on the floor is this really large sort of glowing sculptural installation. And that is actually a large piece of plexiglass that I had used to make all of these skins. So it was the foundation on which I would flip the skin over and rub all of the paper off. And I don't have a very good close-up of this sculptural installation here, but essentially what is on that plexiglass is all the residue from the labor that went into making these works. And the way that it's lit, underneath it, you can see all of the shadows of the residue. So you can kind of see how everything is completely intertwined together in most of the works that I've just gone through. The next work I want to show you is different. So this is where things start to deviate. I always said that I wanted to make work that was sort of fun and funny, but I never knew how to do that. It was always sort of serious and very embedded in this conceptual approach to photography. And I had a friend who was doing we'll start here, was doing this skateboard show and had asked all these different artists, including myself, to create a skateboard that was essentially not usable or difficult to use. And so you can see from the installation shot here, that big white box on the black wall is where they were doing the screening, because they actually made a skate video of everyone trying to use these unusable skateboards. But you can see there's someone made a skate ramp, but it has AstroTurf on it. The skateboard on the pedestal on the floor has essentially all of this moss and greenery growing on it. On the left side, there's one on the wall that's made out of a street sign. There were some that had all of these, the wheels didn't go in the right direction. And on the right, the one that's sort of really bright and glowing. And here's the close-up of it. And I don't know how well you can see it, is actually the one that I did for this. So still using some of the materials that I had been using in the photographic making I was doing, but there's a plexiglass skateboard, and the wheels are actually balloons, and you'll see on top there's sort of translucent feet. I had made glue casts of my feet and put them on top of the skateboard. So again, an unusable skateboard, and I called it Nothing Flat. So that's kind of a fun deviation from the other work. From there, I started to do some things that were a little bit more rooted in performance. And this one is called Pop Piece. And for this one, I had built this mound of balloons around myself. And I set out a table of instruments, forks, toothpicks, knives, feathers, all kinds of different things that might be used to pop a balloon. And everyone who came to this event got to choose which device they wanted to use, and they would come up and pop a balloon until I was out of that space. So you can kind of see everyone choosing their instruments and coming in to pop the balloons, and it was very cathartic for everyone, actually. And you can see in this image here, they've almost got me out. I actually wore sunglasses just in case someone decided to stick something near my eyeball. But I must say, if I ever did this piece again, I would wear earplugs, because it is way louder than you think it's going to be. But this is so I'm moving more into performative works at this point. But again, as I've mentioned in lecture and some of your feedback on things you've written, the significance of photography with performative events and happenings is huge, because these things are, they're experiential, right? It happens one time, or it can happen multiple times, but the access is only available to people who are there. So if anyone else wants to see what might have happened, you have to have some sort of documentation. But of course, it's not the same as actually being there. It's a very different experience. So typically, whenever there is some sort of performative event or happening, there is some type of publication that goes along with this. In this case, this pamphlet that was made, and so on the back side are the instructions, which reads, for the performer, blow up 100 or more balloons, sit on a chair, cover body in balloons, wait until all of the balloons are popped. And then for the audience, choose an instrument from the table, pop a balloon using the instrument of your choice, keep popping until there are no more inflated balloons. And then there you can see there's a safety pin kind of stuck in that pamphlet there. But if you were to take the pin out and open it up, all it says over and over and over is pop, 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 pop. So that was, a piece where it's fun to get people involved and, not just have them watch you, but actually participate in this cathartic event. I think to the point where I'm going to flip to the website now. So let me get to my share screen and hopefully I'll figure it out. Share screen, here we go. All right, so here is my website, and I'm going to go back down here so that we can I'm not going to go through every single thing on here because it gets a little nutty, but I will do some highlights. The next thing I want to share is the wish piece. And this was another performative event that actually took place shortly after the 2016 election. So it was intended as a sort of cathartic experience, and you can see here, Wish Peace is an act of collective hope and healing, an opportunity to create a micro moment of possible empowerment against a continuing moment of oppressive macro. And I've done this piece several times in a lot of different venues. This one that you're seeing here is a museum in Wausau, and I'm set up at this little table. Here we go, this is better. This little table over here with my station, and you can see that it really was about bringing people together. And essentially what I'm doing is I have these little pieces of paper and I ask people to write down a wish or a worry or a joy or, a fear, and then I roll it up in a little tube and start it on fire, as you can see me doing here. And they're supposed to fly up in the air, but sometimes they tip over, as you see. And then I would put the ashes from the wish, into a little jar. And whoever had just done their wish, they would leave their wish on the table. And then they would take someone else's wish to look after. So they then became responsible for someone else's wish or worry, not knowing what it was. And here's a nice one where you can see it really burning. This was the very first time I did the piece. It was actually in someone's apartment as part of this apartment gallery show tour. And then this is my friend Kurt testing out the Wishes project here. So that's the wish piece. There you can see him lighting his own. All right. The next piece that I want to share, oh, to see what happens, any wishes that were not claimed, I took and turned into glass slides. So what you see here are remnants of wishes. They're 2 by 2 inch glass slides, and then they're projected on a wall. So you can see kind of, it's called Anatomy of a Wish because really it is, you know, what the wish looks like after it's been burned under glass and light. And so this is kind of a callback to the photographic elements that I was using before. All right. Then let's go to, let's see. Ice Piece is a good one. This one is a cassette tape, but it was for this event, and I froze all of these cassette tapes in ice. And on one side, if you know the musical artist Vanilla Ice, he did that song Ice Ice Baby. And then he does this interview where he's basically denying that he was sampling under pressure for that song. So I have him like recorded on one side of these tapes denying that he was sampling under pressure. And then on the opposite side is, I think, like 10 minutes of the sound of ice melting. But I froze like 40 of these tapes in blocks of ice. And so if anyone wanted a tape, they had to get it out of the block of ice by melting it, which was great because this show happened in the dead of summer, so it was really hot and not too difficult to get anything out. It did take some time, but you can kind of hear people trying to like use their hands to get their tapes out of ice. And then the thing was that the outside of the cassette tape was on display and you could take it, but if you wanted the actual tape, you had to get the tape out of ice. So again, this is something, it's kind of funny, but it's also, very conceptually rooted. The next one is another performance. I won't have you watch the whole video because that's long, but if you want to, it's on my website. Essentially, this is called Escape Orchestra, and what I did was this gallery let me use it for, I think, like 4 or 5 days. And so I basically lived in this gallery, and I blew up balloons for 4 days, and I filled the gallery from floor to ceiling. And you can see kind of the progress here. And after I filled it, I then went through and popped all of the balloons, sort of letting myself out. You can kind of, this one's really lovely. You can see the reflection of all the folks kind of watching. And then, of course, I made a publication to accompany everything there with some writings and works from other artists, and also speaking about the piece itself. And then after I had popped all the balloons, there's all this residue of the balloons in the space, and you can see what it looked like afterwards. I still had a couple to reach on the ceiling there. But if we go back up, you can kind of see me noodling around in the balloons, popping them. I don't think the sound on, no, I don't know. So you kind of get the sound. It's the balloons popping, but that was the orchestra was the balloons popping, and I had an audio recorder in my back pocket, so I did make a actual audio version of this work as well. But again, this is about endurance and labor and breath and skin and space. And so, after I'd popped all these balloons, everyone from the audience was invited to come inside, and they could, take pieces of the balloons if they wanted to, or just hang out. The publications that I had made were free, so they could take that with them as well. But it took me 5 days to blow up over 3,100 balloons, and it took me 45 minutes to pop them. So that's that. The next one we'll do is the fluxed body and parts. So I hate conferences, because at artist conferences or academic conferences, everyone always just like stands and reads papers, and it's so boring. And I got invited to be a part of this panel that was about Fluxus artists, and everyone was assigned a body part, and I was like, well, I'm not going to write a paper about this. Like, this is ridiculous. So there's this artist, well, two artists in the Fluxus group from the 60s, and one is Charlotte Moorman, and the other is Nam June Paik. Now, Nam June Paik, actually, I should probably just look them up here for you. So Nam June Paik, he made all of these electronic works using televisions, and there's this cellist at the time named Charlotte Moorman, and so he would make a lot of works for her. So what you're seeing on the right side here is her wearing his TV bra. So there's tiny TVs, and they're strapped to her. And then he also made this TV cello for her, and she could actually play it. Now, when I was assigned my body part for this panel, I was assigned the breast, and so I was like, okay, well, I am going to make an iPhone bra in sort of homage to Nam June Paik's TV bra for Charlotte. And you might be thinking, like, well, what's the point of all that? Well, the point is that Charlotte Moorman is most known for being the topless cellist. She was arrested for performing topless in a theater, even though it was an experimental music art event. And at her trial, there were all of these like old white men basically completely degrading her the entire time and telling her, well, because you're a woman, you shouldn't be allowed to do this. And without going into, incredible detail about it, I had gone to the archives at Northwestern University where they have all of the transcripts from this trial. And I pulled out every single time an old white man said something derogatory about Charlotte or about women in general, or about her playing topless. And I built this slideshow that you can see in the background here, and each slide is a picture of Charlotte with a different term for the word breast over the top, like something that you might use casually, like if you're, like knobs or jugs or titties or something like, bazooms, things like that. And so I had this slideshow playing on the iPhone bra. Because of the size of the room, I had to project it on the wall as well. And then the audio was me reading all of these really derogatory comments, which was funny because folks who didn't know about the trial, they thought that I was actually saying these things. But as they sort of went through this, 10-minute presentation that I did, they realized that I was repurposing these quotes, and also confronting this whole issue with academic conferences where it's like no one wants to sit and listen to someone read a boring paper. So I decided to just undo that and get up there with my iPhone bra and my homage to Charlotte and Nam June Paik with their TV bra. So again, this is performance, but getting a little bit more into the academic criticism side of things. And then my most recent project is called 840 Variations on Vexations. And this is something that I've been working on for 6 years. And the entire description of this project is here, and I think I'll read it to you. 2016 to present. Oh yeah, I guess 4 years, 5 years, 4 years. It seems like so much longer. Anyways, so there's this 19th century composer. His name is Erik Satie, and he wrote this piece called Vexations. It's a very short piano piece, and he never played it in his lifetime. He never published it in his lifetime. But after he passed, folks went into his apartment to clean everything out, and they found it shoved behind one of the pianos in there. And it has this little note on it that says, Vexation should be played 840 times in succession. It would be advisable to prepare oneself beforehand and in the deepest of silence by serious immobilities. Now, Satie often put a lot of different, like, funny little notes on his compositions that he wrote. So it's not really known whether or not he was serious that you should play it 840 times or if he was just, like, being a goofball about it. But when John Cage found this piece in the 50s, he took it seriously, and so he held this marathon performance of it where he got together 13 pianists, and they rented a theater space in New York, and they did sort of a relay where someone would play for a little while and then someone else would go in and tag it out. And they did this, and it took almost 19 hours to complete. And only one person sat through the entire thing, and after it was all over, they stood up and clapped encore, which is just nutty. And so what I've done is, I grew up as a classically trained pianist, and playing works, and I would always memorize them when I had to go to competitions. And anytime I stumbled across this piece, this Vexations piece, I could never memorize it. And anyone who knows, even a little bit about reading music, he has no key signature, and he changes the accidentals on every single chord. So there's no consistency. He's basically making it impossible for you to memorize. And it bothered me a lot. And so as I was, growing up and moving on, this piece would kind of come back to haunt me. And finally, I think it was in 2015, I was like, this is driving me bonkers. I need to do something about this. So I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to trap Satie in his own little sort of joke here, and I'm going to create 840 variations on Vexation. So I sat down, and over the course of 6 months, I wrote a list of 840 projects to do that related back to Vexations. And eventually this is going to be made into a book, but I'm still working on the execution of a lot of these projects. So what you see here on this page are projects that, are, some the ones you see here are were completed either privately or are in progress, and then I have links. I'll show you to some of the other ones that were completed in public spaces. But first of all, you have number 300 here, which is a composite portrait combining all available images of Erik Satie from Google image search. And as we scroll down, we have number 308, play 840 times on one music box manually. So I hand punched the score to Vexations into these music box scores, and then this was hosted in a private home. Everyone went through and played it over and over again. And then we have things like rewriting the score for binary code 840 times, which is certainly in progress because that takes a very long time by hand. Here is something that's a little bit more playful. We got together a group of people and divided up 840 so that everyone had, I think everyone had to do like 210 footprints or something. But we wanted to make 840 footprints in the snow. Here we have number 47, which is to remove the stuff and connect the dots. And this one is in progress. So anytime I have an event that's related to this project, I bring the connect the dots scores along so that folks can kind of play that. And then we have on the left number 3, which is I took the score and printed it in the darkroom, and that one again is in progress. I think I am up to 140 prints, so I've got a long ways to go with that. But also making silver gelatin prints is quite expensive, so who knows when that'll get done. Number 29, sew a thread through each note. This one again is in progress, but I'm taking red thread and sewing it through each note on the score. This is number 228, create 840 sati masks. Now, there's not 840 people in this room, but this is a group in a private home in 2019, so don't freak out about pandemic stuff. But they're all wearing the sati masks here. Another rewrite where I'm rewriting the score backwards by hand, again in progress. This is the cutting mat surface from 840 Variations on Vexation number 1, where I was using a leather punch to punch out all the notes from the score. And then here we have number 7, just simply a stack of 840 scores. This one is very difficult to see, but it is rewriting Vexations for Morse code 840 times, again, still in progress. And then this one's a transcription. This one's a recipe, number 598. Prepare 840 pears, guests may eat them. I actually did prepare 840 pears in I think it was 2018. The recipe, I wrote the recipe down later, but I did the pears prior to that. And then on the left, we're rewriting the score for letter notations, and on the right is Vexation for Alison Knowles, who is a Fluxus artist who worked a lot with beans. So this is an homage to her, but basically fill a jar with 840 beans. So these are kind of things that are in progress or were done privately. And then if we kind of go into some of the works over here, here is the one where I did it for Alison Knowles. This is separate from just filling the jar with beans. This one is, you see my instructions here. Fill a jar with 840 beans. Spill the beans. Put the beans back in the jar and repeat 840 times, which I did on the floor of this space. So I don't have the full thing videoed. It's just someone got a nice 20-second recording of that there. And then I did 840 dominoes, which is surprisingly difficult to set up on a floor that is even slightly crooked. But the goal of this one was to set up 840 dominoes and knock them down, which there's some images of here. All of the setup, and then of course the knockdown, but I have a video. It took me 6 hours to get that set up. You hear my sigh at the end there. So again, like playful things, right? Like it doesn't always have to be super serious, but you can see how it's all rooted in this concept that I'm working with, right? A lot of what's going on here is about, yes, endurance, but also labor and what does it mean to be an artist or a musician, and what are the rules? And if there are rules, why do we have to follow them? That's kind of how I feel about a lot of things. So then there's this one, which is the scorto. I mostly said that out loud, so I'd remember. Oh, never mind. We don't need audio for this one. But anyways, this is number 327, where we tied 840 scores to the bumper of my car and then drove. And so we followed the car down the street. Here you can see the stack of scores. Here is everyone tying them on to the rope together. It was really beautiful in winter in Minneapolis, so that's fun. So that's the score toe. Vexations for fire. This one, I lit 840 matches. And what you're going to see in the video here, I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. It's only 5 minutes, but it's very repetitive. The actual performance took over 11 hours to light 840 matches, but I was able to speed it up so that you can watch it in about 5 minutes and 2 seconds, I think is the, or 22 seconds, which actually is the same amount of time as, oh, is there no audio? There we go. As this Babies on Fire song. So, what's actually kind of great about this is that you can see the light in my studio kind of getting darker as this goes on. It took all day. And I did not start bright and early in the morning. So you can see the light kind of changing. So you can see the time passing and the matches burning. And, so you're more than welcome to return and watch the whole thing on your own, but I think you get the gist of that right now. Let's see, and then I'll show you boat party. We made 140 paper boats out of the score to Vexations. And of course, you can see my little publication to accompany everything there. And the paper looks funny because we were using a very eco-friendly paper, completely biodegradable, safe for the environment, because what do you do after you've made 840 paper boats out of the score to Vexations? You go and you release them on the lagoon in McKinley Park, which is exactly what we did. And you can kind of see all the boats floating out in the lagoon there, which is kind of fun. Let's see, what else is fun? Oh, here's the Vex. This one, I took the scores, 840 of them, and I had 3 blenders, and I was blending up the scores all night and pouring them into these jars so folks could take their Vexations smoothie home with them. So not only is this, you know, a performance and a happening and folks can come and take things away to have, but it's also a sound piece because I'm working these 3 blenders to kind of, you know, play at different speeds and different levels and different sounds. Also, it was really hot that day. Okay. Next, I have my Vexations for bubbles, or with bubbles, sorry. This one I actually drilled the score into these acrylic templates that you can see us holding here. And this was part of a performance at the Chicago Artists Coalition. And there was a whole room of people, and I knew that I needed 2 helpers, and these 2 lovely gentlemen came and did the bubbles with me. So we made our own little score using the bubble templates there. And the next one we did was Vexations for a flagpole. And this one, I had rewritten the score to Vexations for semaphore, which is flag signals. And then I had I had these 3 women playing it with their flags. And I made tiny flags so that anyone who came to the performance could also follow along with what the girls were doing. And then, of course, at the very end, we had, where is it? I had a giant Sati flag. So what you see on the flags is that's his face. He had glasses and a little mustache. And I made this giant Sati flag, and we did a flag raising at the end. And then the most recent one that was done publicly was Vexations for the Lake, and this was another instruction-based one where I gave the instructions to a friend of mine, and he went to the lake and drew the score in the sand. Here, I'll make it a little bigger so you can see it on the beach, and then he watched the tide take it out. So that's I think that's a good overview. I don't want to overwhelm you. I know that vexation ones gets very repetitive over and over and over again, but that's that. I have like mostly the recent stuff on here. Anything I skipped over doesn't mean that it's not worth showing you. It's just I didn't want to wear you out on my stuff, but I did think it was really important for me to share with you what I do, and for you to see how you can kind of evolve an artistic practice from just photography into something that can incorporate anything you want to, right? Whether it's a performance or drawing in the sand or writing a score or raising a flag or any of those things. You know, and as I said before, all of these sort of experiential things like the flagpole and the bubbles and the blended, they're events that are happening and they're not going to happen again. So you need that photographic documentation for these happenings and these performances to kind of live on. And, you know, there's a lot of debate over, you know, whether or not that's okay, or if they should just be these ephemeral things. But I think it's important that they have this visual documentation so that it can be studied and accessible to many more people than only those who can be there. Now, since this is the end of my lecture on myself, you're probably wondering, well, what are we going to do for our journal this week? I would love it if you could choose something that I talked about in my repertoire here from my body of work and write your journal about it. Write about what you think. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you understand it? Did you not understand it? What about it was exciting for you or interesting or weird? Use that. Use content from this lecture, or you can, you know, again, go back to my website and look at the things I didn't show you, and you know, use those as your inspiration for your journal. And then I will choose something for your photo recreation, and that'll be it. This is the last lecture, the last journal, the last recreation, and then I'll be looking forward to your final papers coming through. So again, thank you so much for a wonderful term. You've all been total troopers, and I will see you. Well, not next time because this is the last lecture, but I will see you metaphorically in your final papers. So take care.